webcast. So we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how you can put it to work to protect your business from the impact of cybercrime. So as usual, I'm joined by some great guests. So I'm really pleased to introduce Martin Borrett. So Martin is from our technology partner, IBM. Martin is an IBM Distinguished Engineer and Technical Director for IBM Security here in the UK. We've also got Roger Noble with us. So Roger is a data scientist and founder and CEO at Noble Dynamic, and he's also a long-time collaborator with the product team at Predatar. And finally, we've got Rick Norgate next to me. So Rick is the managing director at Predatar, and he's the mastermind behind some of the most innovative features within Predatar. So thank you all for joining us today. So before we kick off the conversation, I'm going to just take a quick moment to explain how this session is going to work. So we know you're all really busy, so we try and keep our webcast down to 30 minutes maximum. We're aiming for about 25. So it's not going to be a technical deep dive, high-level conversation around challenges, solutions, and best practices. We'll start with a bit of conversation. So I'll pick the brains of our expert guests here, and then we'll close the session with a pre-recorded demo video which Rick's put together for us, which will showcase, some of the concepts that we've been talking about and how we're kind of putting machine learning and AI to work within the Predatar platform to help you boost your resilience. So without further ado, we'll dive into the conversations. Actually, I almost forgot to do one thing. I always forget to do this piece of housekeeping. So your questions, Q&A. If you have questions throughout the session, for the panel here, if you use the Q&A panel on the side of the screen, on the right-hand side of your screen now, then we've got a member of the Predatar team on hand to answer those. Or if they're questions specifically for the panelists, then we will get back to you after this broadcast. So now, without further ado, let's kick off the conversation. Right, if we start with you, Martin. So before we talk about how we can, put AI to work in terms of, boosting resilience, let's first of all talk about, why we need to. What is it that cyber criminals are doing to get the upper hand?
Yeah, great question, Ben. And let me say thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here with you all. AI is such a fascinating topic. I mean, it's clearly something that is very, very topical. It's much discussed, debated. There's a lot of hype about it. And I think it is important we discuss it. And it's useful to think about it through a couple of lenses. One is the whole business of securing AI. Now, I know that's not a topic we're going to get into in depth, but it's worth the audience thinking about. How am I going to secure those large language models, the use of AI? But from a threat perspective, there are also two angles. There is, how can we leverage these AI capabilities in our solutions? But just as we're doing that to create better defenses, better detection, we have to recognize that the bad guys, the bad actors, our cyber adversaries, are out there also thinking actively about how can we exploit this great technology innovation to their benefit. For example, to create more realistic phishing campaigns, to craft emails and communications that look more and more realistic, as if they're coming from someone you know. And we know that's going on. We know that from our X-Force research. We publish that every year. And we've seen something like, 800,000 discussions on the dark web, all about generative AI and how they're going to use it to mount ever more sophisticated campaigns. So that's absolutely, a concern for organizations. And this is just part of the cat and mouse game that is cybersecurity. New threats, new challenges are going to emerge. We have to recognize what they are. We have to think about what they mean. The good news, if you like, is that we didn't see any, substantial campaigns using those techniques in 2023. So we haven't seen it at scale yet. But we know, and we can see in the dark web, tools being developed like Fraud GPT and Worm GPT, similar to Chat GPT, but with bad intents. Those tools are out there and being developed. And so, for me, it's just important to be really aware of that, what those threats are, so that we can think about how can we make our defenses more robust, more resilient? How can we prepare ourselves for that threat?
Excellent. Thanks, Martin. So, it always feels like, the bad actors, the cyber criminals, are a step ahead, and it feels like now we're maybe on the verge of them, taking further steps, getting more ahead of the game. And so, what will that, what can that mean for businesses?
Yeah, I recognise that narrative. I don't actually feel that way. I feel it's much more equal. And actually, I think we have a great opportunity on the defender side. I think actually, I'm going to say we're slightly ahead. There's opportunities, and we'll discuss this, I'm sure, we're already building, AI-based and generative AI-based defensive capabilities into our solutions. We're thinking about how we can use them in an integrated way. It is absolutely possible to defend against these things. So I'm optimistic, but in order to do that, you need to think through the risks. You need to be aware, and you need to think through, how do I create a solution that is integrated, that works across protection, detection, and the response capability. And that has to encompass, many things, from the network, the infrastructure, the storage, up through the stack. But we can do that. That can be done. So I'm much more optimistic.
Yeah, it's really good to hear the optimistic viewpoint, and also good to hear about, we were talking about that multi-layer solution earlier, which you just talked about, that sort of end-to-end capability. But is it fair to say that if the use of AI, and machine learning techniques by the bad actors becomes more prevalent, that would increase the chance, essentially the chance of being hacked, and also, I guess, the chance of those bad actors evading your defenses, and I guess the chance of them, hiding malware and malicious artifacts that are a bit more complicated, harder to find.
I think you're right. I think it does. It does. It increases the attack surface. It gives them the opportunity to act at greater speed, greater volume. It speaks to the need for technology and automation to counter that. I think we will see more sophisticated attacks that are harder to detect, that are going to be much harder to detect without AI. Just as they're creating things with AI, we're going to need that on the detection side to recognize what is, normal behavior, human behavior versus machines.
Yeah.
Martin, you mentioned it on the coffee before we did the filming, that obviously you didn't see any attacks in 23 where people are using this AI for things like phishing yet. Obviously, you see that a lot in the news where it's being used for things like disinformation, where obviously it's been things pushed on social through AI. I'm really surprised it's not being used from a cyber point of view. Why do you think that is? Is it just not mature enough, or is it something else?
It's a maturity critical mass. So we didn't see any campaigns.
Yeah.
So that isn't to say people haven't tried things out,
right.
Experimented, researched. They are, we can see they're discussing and debating and they're developing tooling, but it hasn't happened en masse. And I think that is to do with, maturity and a critical mass and a critical mass of AI capabilities as well. I think it will come. I do think it will come. But I think that we have an opportunity by preparing and planning to get ahead of that curve, by looking at the research, by thinking about our strategy. I think we can get ahead of it. I think we can keep abreast of it.
So I know that IBM, is doing a lot in the space of AI for cybersecurity. And on this session, I'd like to focus a little bit specifically around the use of AI for data resiliency. So if we take the position that you will be breached sooner or later, then let's explore how AI techniques can help you overcome those challenges. So I'd like to bring in Roger. So Roger's been working with the product team at Predatar for probably 2 or 3 years now. Could you tell us a little bit about that work, and I guess what's the problem you're trying to solve? What is it you're trying to achieve with the work you're doing with our product team?
Yeah, there's definitely a few different problems that we're trying to solve. One of them is that there are already tools out there for detecting anomalies, malware, those kinds of things. But what we're sort of seeing is that those tend to generate a lot of noise. They tend to generate a lot of false positives. And a lot of the time it's because they just aren't adaptable enough, and they just aren't sensitive enough to the varying amounts of behavior that kind of these bad actors and that malware kind of presents itself as. And so we've been developing techniques, we've been using machine learning specifically to generate models that really are a lot more sensitive and really can understand the behavior and the change of behavior and of the patterns that you see within a backup system. So rather than looking at kind of a simple distribution of behavior, this is something that we were sort of talking about earlier with the kind of the Shannon entropy. That sort of looks at a distribution of sort of pattern of behavior within the data set, but distributions themselves inherently kind of lose information. They only show sort of the general behavior, but it misses out on the nuance of how behavior might look over time and the sequence of behaviors that might happen. So the way that a machine, a server, and the patterns that you see within the data, looks, say, 6 months ago, then might suddenly change depending on the workloads. And so what we're doing is sort of training models to sort of see that full behavior, take in the full history of the machine, and then use that as a way to sort of have a better prediction over what is and isn't an anomaly.
So this is about then, when organizations have these, I guess, large storage environments, and there's lots of moving pieces, there's lots of moving data in there anyway, which is perfectly normal behavior. It's people saving files, it's the backup happening day in, day out. It's peaks and troughs in natural business activity. I think what you're saying is the work you're doing with machine learning is sort of, really helping to kind of filter through the noise of everything that's going on in a way that's far more sophisticated, far more nuanced, to really pick out what is malicious activity, what's a threat, what's something that shouldn't be happening versus, what should be there.
Yeah, I think we've already sort of talked about these, these tools, especially AI, can be used for bad as well, and these can really proliferate. So then how do you kind of really take sort of action to sort of try and sort of know what is and isn't an anomaly? And so that's what we're trying to do, is to make sort of people's lives easier so that they have a lot more confidence in these sort of anomalies.
I mean, I can build on what Roger's saying with a practical example. So the work that Roger's done with us, we're on our third iteration now of anomaly detection. It's our third model, and it's the most sophisticated one. I guess Roger can talk about the different techniques we're using. On anomaly detection 2.0, our second model, we raised anomalies for about 15 to 20% of the backups that were obviously created. With the new model, 0.8% of backups we raise anomalies for. So obviously we're filtering out significantly more noise with this more intelligent model than before, where it was, getting on for a fifth of backups we were raising anomalies for. Now it's less than 1% because the models are much more sophisticated, and it's not just using that kind of a standard distribution curve.
Okay, finding less anomalies, but that's actually a good thing because the accuracy is much better. We know those are anomalies which are much more likely to be something.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're bad, just means the behaviour's definitely changed from what's normal. And that could be because it's just changed. Someone's done something that's not normal.
Roger, could you maybe elaborate on some of the machine learning techniques that you've brought into Predatar?
Yes, really interesting actually, the way that we went about solving this. It wasn't just one model in the end that we went with, but actually multiple models. So we went through a process of looking at the individual kind of data points, the features that were coming in from the data set, the two main ones being the bytes sort of transferred and the deduplication ratio. Those were the kind of the two signals that we had to play with. And then we evaluated 10 different sort of models, 10 different sort of machine learning architectures to see which ones were sort of producing the best results. And of those, we sort of selected two in the end. that we then use against those two sort of streams of data. And that's what we use to sort of get our results. So what the models do, they're both sort of forms of what's known as a long short-term memory, LSTM, sort of architecture, which are really good for time series data, which is what we're dealing with. And we combine the results of those two models and then use that to get our output. And what we're looking for is anything that's sort of above what we would consider normal behavior for those servers, for those backups. And then we produce a sort of a scaled result as an output. So we can say that there's either a really high confidence that this is an anomaly or a low confidence, and there's sort of a graduation sort of scale in between. So we're sort of trying to give as much information as possible to the end users so they can really make those sort of actionable decisions rather than just saying it's a sort of a binary anomaly. It may not be, and we don't know. It's really up to those administrators, those people that look after the servers, that can really make that call. So it's helping and empowering them to make better decisions, sort of through these models.
Yeah. Okay. So more data points over a longer time period, essentially gives the machine learning a lot more intelligence, a lot more data to go on, which gives users a higher chance of finding the stuff that shouldn't be there, and B, understanding what it is so that they can decide how to respond. If we maybe over to you, Rick, have we got any evidence of of how successful these techniques are in finding these anomalies, threats, things that shouldn't be there?
Yeah, I mean, my favourite stat is since going live with our cyber resilience, and obviously with the anomaly detection in there, 75% of the customers using it have found malware in their backups. And that's through a combination of things detected by the anomaly detection, plus things like scheduled tests that we have running in the background as well. So yeah, 75% of the customers have found things like Trojan horses and malware in their backups that their production XDR tools didn't spot.
That really is quite an insightful statistic. So finding malicious artifacts in there that they didn't know were there, that have been replicated into their storage environment. So Roger's spoken a little bit about some of the machine learning techniques that are in place for anomaly detection. But Rick, I understand that there's something new recently released in Predatar that uses AI in a different way, but again to help to help our users understand their environment and boost resilience. Could you tell us a little bit about Aurora?
I can. So Aurora is our new AI, and it's basically what they call an LLM, which is a large language model. It's something we've been building and training for a year. So essentially, if you think about a backup environment in a typical customer, you've normally got multiple backup products, storage products, SIEM platforms, lots and lots of information. And what Predator's been able to do for years now is bring all of that information into one place. Essentially, what the language model or Aurora lets us do is analyze that information and then use it in really insightful ways. So, for example, you think about that much information, AI is really good at sorting through that, spotting trends, spotting patterns, and then being able to deliver that back to you in a useful way. So if you think about like a ChatGPT, Aurora's very similar to that, but for cyber resilience. So it'll look at all this information, analyze it, and then it can provide it back to you in non-technical words. So it can give you guidance, it can highlight problems, it can show you what you need to do to fix things. I guess the use cases for it are almost unlimited. Version 1 that we've just launched, what that's designed to do is give you, on a weekly basis, a basically report against your environment. So here's where you're good, here's where you're weak, here's your issues, and it provides all of that back in natural language. Where we're going with it next is there'll be chatbots, so you can interrogate that. Why is my backup success rate dropping off? Aurora can tell you and say it's dropping off for this reason. These things are happening, you're getting these repeating issues, and here's how you fix them. So where we're going next is Aurora today is built for IBM Storage Protect. We're going to expand that out over the next 12 months to include things like Veeam, Rubrik, Cohesity, and other backup platforms, so that no matter what combination of backup or storage products customers are using, Aurora will be able to give you guidance and advice across all of them.
Okay, so thanks, Rick. So Aurora sounds like quite a unique capability. I'm certainly not aware of anything similar in the marketplace. So I've got some really exciting news to close with. So viewers of this webcast can actually apply to test drive Aurora for free for 3 months. So if you're interested, we'll bring up a slide on the screen now with details of how you can apply for that. And we'll pick 3 applicants at random to test drive Aurora. So all that's really left for me to do is some final thank yous. So thanks again to our guests. I'd like to thank IBM, Arrow and Bonfire Video for their support with this webcast. And thank you to you guys. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today. We'll see you next time.